So I got sent this email. What the hell was that? I can't explain it. I myself am a skeptic, but I can't explain that. This isn't the only email that I get though. 7 viewers, 7 true stories, from lights that stalk the outback to haunted houses and nightmares that walk in the daylight. These are the messages that landed in my inbox, stories too strange, too personal, and too real to ignore. This Halloween, well, I'm opening the mail. Welcome back to another Halloween special here on Shadow Matter, where every week for the month of October, I'll be releasing a new video that focuses on a spookier side of our world. As I said before, every year around this time, my inbox fills with messages. Some are lighthearted, spooky, little coincidences, or family ghost stories passed down through generations, but others stay with you. And boy, did you guys send through a bunch of them. Good on you, Shadow fam. I might even add them to my podcast channel, which, by the way, you can find by searching Shadow Matter on Spotify. Shameless plug. Let me know if you guys enjoy this sort of thing, because I certainly do, and I would love to hear more stories from you. Send them to the email address linked on screen or in the description below. These are the ones written late at night by people who have seen something they can't explain. Truck drivers, night shift workers, quiet neighbors, families who just wanted a fresh start. All of them reaching out to say, hey, I think this really happened to me. Today's episode, I'll be sharing 7 of those stories. True encounters told by people who lived them. From the lonely highways of Queensland to haunted homes in New Zealand, and even a cheap rental in South Africa that no one dared to stay in twice. So, put the kids to bed, dim the lights, and set your notifications to silent. It's about to get spooky in here. This first story comes to us from Brett in Queensland, Australia. This happened to me about 10 years ago, somewhere between Boulia and Winton, out in Queensland. At the time, I was driving long haul, hauling fencing materials out west. I'd just finished a delivery late in the evening and was heading back toward Longreach. It was close to midnight, that dead time when the road feels endless and the only sound is your own engine humming. About 40 minutes out of Boulia, I saw a light in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was another ute coming up behind me, except it didn't behave like headlights. It was too high, too round, and had this weird white-yellow glow to it, like a full moon, but brighter. It kept its distance for a bit, maybe 200 meters back. Every so often, it'd vanish behind a rise in the road, then reappear right where it had been, like it was floating. I slowed down to let it pass, it slowed down too. I sped up, so did it. That's when the hairs on the back of my neck went up. Out there, you're used to seeing weird stuff. Mirages, heat shimmer, even satellites, but this wasn't that. This light had intent. It was following me. After about 20 minutes of this, I pulled over, killed the engine, switched off my headlights. Nothing but darkness. The silence out there is unreal. You can hear your own heartbeat. Then from the edge of the scrub, maybe 50 meters away, the light rose up, just lifted off the ground like a slow balloon. It hovered there, dead still. And the bush around it glowed faintly like it was shining through a fog. I don't know what possessed me, but I grabbed my torch and got out. My boots hit the gravel, and that's when it moved. Not toward me, not away. It sort of glided sideways, smooth as silk, keeping the same distance like it was watching. When I turned the torch on, it blinked out completely. Gone. I stood there for a solid minute, waiting for it to come back. Nothing. So I climbed back into the truck, locked the doors, and took off. About 10 minutes down the track, I glanced at the rear view again, and there it was. Behind me, same distance, same light. It followed me all the way to Winton. It didn't stop again until I hit the town limits and saw streetlights. When I finally got to the motel, I looked back, and the road behind me was just empty blackness. I told a local about it the next morning, and he just nodded and said, "You've met the Min." I laughed it off at the time, but that night I barely slept. I've driven that road plenty since, but I've never seen it again. Still, sometimes when I'm out there and the horizon goes dark, I swear I catch a flicker in the mirror. Anyway, thought you might like this one for your Halloween episode. Keep doing what you're doing, mate. The stories keep us company out here. Brett. Out there in the outback under that endless black sky, it's easy to believe the strange lights are something ancient, something that's always been here. But what happens when the strange doesn't drift over the horizon? It moves into your home. The next story came from Peter Kruger in New Zealand, who wrote to tell me about his brother Johan, a man who didn't believe in ghosts until he rented a house that nobody else would stay in. Mate, first of all, thank you so much for your channel. I can't wait for my notification every time you post. Great content and well delivered. Thanks, Peter. Thank you so much. It is so nice to have a fellow Kiwi share quality content on the web. I identify as trans-Tasman, but that's okay. Below is a true story of when we lived in South Africa. A cheap rental. This is a true account of a haunting that happened to my brother. A man who, until this experience, scoffed at any mention of ghosts or the supernatural. To understand why I believed his story so completely, you need to know who my brother is. My brother Johan is the quintessential man's man. In school, he wrestled. He served in the armed forces, he's a hunter, biker, and skilled carpenter, and even served as his town's fire chief for a time. He's tough as nails, yet a devoted husband and father. In the early 2000s, the mine where he worked shut down, forcing him and his family to move. Using his severance, John bought a small video/DVD rental shop in the quiet town of Standerton in South Africa, where his in-laws lived. It should have been a fresh start, except the local rental market was impossibly tight. Every available home was either a dilapidated 2-bedroom or far beyond his budget. Then, out of the blue, an estate agent called. She found him a house, and at a rent less than half the going rate. John braced himself for the worst. Peeling paint, broken windows, maybe a leaking roof. What he found stunned him. The house was immaculate. 4 bedrooms, marble floors, a pool, a games room, and a sprawling kitchen. It was easily the best property he'd seen. Certain there had been some mistake, he double-checked with the agent about the rent. No mistake, she said. The owner had gone overseas and set that price himself. Johan signed the contract on the spot. For the first 2 weeks, everything seemed perfect. Except for one strange detail. The family's miniature dachshund, Floy, Afrikaans for flea, refused to go near the children's bedroom. She would stand at the doorway growling, hackles raised, no matter how they coaxed her inside. Then the nightmares began. His 2 sons, aged 4 and 6, started waking in the early hours of the morning, screaming and crying. When Johan asked what was wrong, they said a man-sized skeleton spider with a human head was talking to them. He dismissed it as nightmares from watching too many of the horror films stocked at his video store. It was mid-July, winter in the southern hemisphere, and Standerton's nights can dip well below freezing. The house's marble floors seemed even colder than usual. One night, Johan woke again to his children's terrified screams. Their bedroom was only 2 meters from his own, just down a short hallway. He hurried in, switched on the light, and found the boys trembling on their bunk beds, the older on top, the younger below. He soothed them until they drifted back to sleep, tucking them tightly under their winter sheets and duvets. Then he quietly left, switched off the light, and pulled the door halfway shut. But as soon as he stepped into the hallway, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the house. Johan spun around, flung open the door, and flicked the light back on. The boys were sitting bolt upright, but their beds were completely bare. No sheets, no duvets, no pillows. He froze as an icy rush of air brushed past him. Turning, he saw the children's bedding, neatly folded and stacked in the hallway behind him. "Hell no," he muttered. He scooped up his sons, roused his wife, grabbed the dog, and fled to his in-laws' house without looking back. The next morning, he phoned the estate agent and demanded an explanation. She was matter-of-fact. "Yes," she said, "you're the 4th family to leave that house this year because of similar events." Johan was furious that she hadn't warned him. She explained they were under no legal obligation to disclose such things. He never returned to the house. Instead, he asked his church pastor to cleanse it. Movers packed their belongings while he stayed away. Even after settling into a new rental, he avoided that street entirely. From that night onward, my brother, once the biggest skeptic I knew, became a firm believer in the supernatural. Not every story that lands in my inbox comes wrapped in the paranormal. Some of them are far more real, and in some ways, far more terrifying. Because the truth is, sometimes the monsters we meet aren't made of shadow or smoke, or skeleton spiders. They walk among us. This next message came from a woman in Melbourne who learned that lesson one cold winter night on her way home from work. This next story comes to us from Jess in Victoria, Australia. I just watched your latest video about real-life scares and it reminded me of something that happened a few years ago. It's not paranormal, but it still gives me that sick feeling in my stomach whenever I think about it. I work in the Melbourne CBD, and a few years ago we were pulling long hours at the office. One winter night I didn't finish up until almost 8 p.m. I usually catch a train back to my home in Bond Beach earlier, but tonight was unusually late. On my way to Flinders Street Station, I passed a group of young men hanging around a milk bar. They stopped talking when I went by. You know that feeling when laughter dies and you just know it's because of you? I told myself not to make eye contact and kept walking. I caught the 8:30 train heading toward Frankston. It was nearly empty, just a few passengers spread out. I sat in the middle, headphones in but no music playing, old habit for safety. Just before the doors closed, someone new got on. When I glanced up, my heart sank. It was one of the same guys from outside the shop. He sat a few rows behind me. Every time I shifted seats or looked out the window, I'd catch him glancing up. Not constantly, just enough to make me certain it wasn't random. One stop after another, the train emptied. By Karam, it was just the two of us. I kept my eyes fixed on the reflection in the window, praying someone else would get on. No one did. When we reached Bond Beach, I stepped off without looking back and started walking toward the car park. I could hear footsteps behind me, slow, measured, keeping perfect pace with mine. I sped up, so did he. Halfway to my car, my bag strap slipped off my shoulder and everything spilled. Keys, wallet, makeup, the lot. Of course it did. My fingers were trembling as I scrambled to pick it up. And that's when he caught up. Got a light for a ciggy, he said. I told him I didn't smoke, barely looking up. He smiled. "Ah, come on, everyone smokes. What's your name?" I kept walking, muttered something about being late, but he just stayed beside me, asking question after question. "You live nearby? You got a boyfriend?" His tone was almost playful, but there was something wrong behind it. Finally, I lied. I told him my boyfriend was waiting in the car up ahead, the silver one by the light. He stopped walking for a moment and I thought maybe that was it. I hurried to my car, hands shaking as I searched for my keys. That's when I heard his voice again, just behind me. "So, where's your boyfriend then?" I spun around, adrenaline taking over. "Bugger off and leave me alone. I'm calling the cops." He froze, startled by how loud I was. Then he gave this lazy half smirk, muttered something under his breath, and turned back toward the station. I jumped in the car, locked every door, and sped off. When I got home, I got inside, locked the door straight away. My hands were still shaking. I walked through the house, closing each curtain, trying to calm down. The street outside was quiet, empty. But just as I went to close the lounge blinds, I saw him. The same man, walking slowly down my street, head down, hands in pockets. He paused outside my driveway. I yanked the blind shut so hard it nearly came off the rail, turned off every light, stood in the dark listening to my heart thudding in my ears. After a few minutes I peeked through the gap. The street was empty again. To this day I don't know if he'd followed me from the station or if it was just some awful coincidence. But I never caught the late train again after that night. After hearing Jess's story, I was reminded of how fear can wear different faces. Sometimes it's flesh and blood, the kind that follows you off a train and down a quiet street. Other times, it's something you can't quite see. This next story comes to us from Donna in Kaiapoi, New Zealand. Her story begins like any other night at home. A quiet evening, her cat curled up nearby until something started knocking, rattling, and whispering its way into her life. "Hi Shadow Matter, I've just seen your YouTube vid on spooky stories. Here's one that happened to me one night, followed by some strange things that happened for a while afterwards until I spiritually cleansed my house. I live alone with just my cat for company. My cat is quite timid and runs and hides when my friends pull up to visit. He's long gone by the time they are at my door. This particular night, I'm on the couch, FaceTiming with my friend. My cat is curled up on top of the cat tower behind me. The time is about 8 p.m. and it's dark outside. I have 3 front doors, so to speak. I've got a security door, and right behind that is a glass and aluminium front door. Then there is an enclosed portico about 1.8 meters in length, and there's a wooden front door at the other end which opens up into the lounge. While I'm talking to my friend, I hear a rattle coming from the front door. I took it to be the security door since this was the outermost door, and I thought it must be really windy out there to make the door rattle, as it's never done that before. I give it no more attention and continue chatting away to my friend. Next minute, my cat jumps down and sits about 2 meters away from that wooden front door, staring intently at it. I'm now watching my cat looking at the wooden door while the rattling continues. The rattling has been going on for about 5 minutes by now, and when the wooden front door opens all by itself and my cat is just sitting there, bold as you like, watching it. My heart starts pounding hard against my chest as all the doors are firmly closed and securely locked. There is no one standing either in my lounge or in the portico. By now, I'm up at the door and telling my friend what had just happened. I'm showing her the doorknob, which is one of those round ones, so if it was moving, you wouldn't be able to tell. I had to unlock the door in order to be able to close it and then relock it. While I'm doing that, I notice the night is quiet and still. No wind anywhere. I'm now looking around for anything amiss, and feeling like a prat, told whom or whatever has just entered my house to leave, as they are not wanted here. Then I thought much later maybe they weren't entering but leaving, which means they had been in the lounge with me for over 5 minutes trying to open the door. Not a very pleasant thought. Maybe that is what my cat saw when he sat by the door staring. Who knows? It happened twice more, and on the last occasion the air felt heavy behind the door and was harder to close, as if someone was pushing against it, stopping it from closing. Another night I had just gone to bed after 3 a.m. when no sooner had I put my head on the pillow when 4 loud knocks came from somewhere inside my house. I got up, but there was no one at the door or windows, and I tried banging several different surfaces but wasn't able to replicate the same sound, and to this day, have no idea where the knocks came from. I was watching TV one afternoon when a shadow crossed in front of the screen. I thought it might have been a glitch on the recorded program, so I rewound it and played it again, but there was no dark shadow that resembled a man wearing a hat walking by in that scene. I decided it was time to rid my place of this unwanted entity, so I set about burning sage in every room and spreading salt by all the doors was a good idea. It must have worked, as all the paranormal stuff stopped. To this day, I don't know who or what it was. It's not the first time strange things have happened in the homes I've lived in, but they were some of the most overt and in-your-face experiences I've ever encountered. Donna. Donna's story might make you want to double-check your locks tonight, but not every haunting waits for the dark. Sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones remembered in daylight, through the eyes of someone who was never meant to hear them. The next story came from Graham, one of my older viewers, a man who's carried a memory from his childhood in the Wairarapa of New Zealand for more than 60 years. It started with a Sunday lunch at a friend's farmhouse and a question he was never supposed to ask. I've been watching your channel for a while now and thought you might appreciate something that happened when I was a boy, back in the late 1960s. I'm well into my 70s these days, but the memory is still as clear as the day it happened. My parents were good friends with another family, the Turners, who owned a restored Victorian farmhouse in the Wairarapa. It was one of those big drafty homes with a wraparound veranda and polished timber floors that groaned when you walked on them. Every so often we'd spend a Sunday there, a long lunch, a few drinks for the adults, and the kids tearing around the paddocks until the sun dipped low. The Turners had 2 girls. The youngest, Abby, was a few years younger than me, shy but sweet. She always had this habit of carrying around an old rag doll with one eye missing. On this particular Sunday, the first thing I noticed when we arrived was that Abby wasn't there. I asked her dad where she was. He smiled a bit too quickly and said she's gone to stay with her grandmother for the school break. That struck me as odd. Both her grandmothers had died in the previous years. Lunch ran long. Roast lamb, potatoes, trifle, the usual spread. After we'd finished eating, the adults moved into the kitchen for coffee while us kids were told to play outside. But I'd left my jumper on a chair near the door and went back in to get it. That's when I heard the tone in their voices, low, uneasy. Mr. Turner was saying, "We've had some real trouble with Abby lately." Mum asked, "What kind of trouble?" Mrs. Turner sighed. "We'd better tell you everything." They said Abby had started wetting the bed, something she'd never done before. Then came the nightmares. The doctor called them night terrors and gave her something to help her sleep, but even drugged, she'd wake up screaming. Some mornings, her room looked like a cyclone had been through it. Furniture knocked over, toys scattered, curtains ripped down. The first time it happened, they couldn't find her anywhere. After 20 minutes of searching, they found her half asleep in her old walk-in wardrobe, muttering in her sleep. More doctors, more appointments, but nothing changed. Then Abby began saying that someone stood outside her window at night. Dad said, "A prowler? That's what we thought," Mr. Turner replied. Mr. Turner stayed up one evening with a torch, waiting by her door. Nothing happened. The next night, though, the family woke to a scream that chilled the whole house. And then they heard a massive bang from inside Abby's room. He burst into her room. Abby was sitting bolt upright in bed, eyes wide but not awake. He tried to wake her up, but she was unresponsive. As he held her, trying to calm her down, he noticed something outside Abby's bedroom window. He swore he saw two large red eyes staring back at him. He grabbed her, carried her to his room, and ran outside. But the yard was empty. No footprints, no sound. The next morning, he called the police, complaining of a prowler. The coppers looked around a bit and took statements, but couldn't find any obvious footprints. As they were searching around outside near Abby's bedroom, the copper stops and looks at the wooden window ledge. "You got any problems with possums, mate?" When Mr. Turner said no, one of them pointed out the window ledge. Two deep claw marks carved into the wood. Too wide for a cat, too long for any bird, and definitely not a possum. Just then, one of the floorboards creaked beneath me. Mr. Turner stopped talking. The door swung open and my dad caught me there, frozen. "Off you go, mate," he said gently, but firmly. I bolted out before anyone could say more. But curiosity got the better of me. I wandered around to the side of the house towards Abby's room. The grass was long, buzzing with cicadas. When I reached the window, I saw them, the claw marks, fresh. The paint still curled outward from the gouges. I ran my finger over them. The wood was splintered and deep, like something with real weight had dug in. A few weeks later, the Turners moved away. My parents said they needed a change of scenery. I never saw Abby again, and I never found out what happened to her. Sometimes when I visit the Wairarapa and pass one of those old farmhouses leaning against the hills, I think about that window, those marks, and the look on Mr. Turner's face when he spoke of the red eyes. Whatever was out there that night, it wasn't any prowler. Every so often a message lands in my inbox that feels different. No name, no location, just a story written in the kind of language that tells you the person behind it still can't make sense of what they saw. There's no tragedy here, no haunted house, no flickering lights in an empty hallway. Just one man alone on a dark stretch of road and something waiting for him above the tree line. They've asked that I keep their name out of it, but what he described speaks for itself. Hi Shadow Matter. I'm writing under the strict understanding that you won't use my name or the exact location of where this happened. It was some years ago now, but the memory of that night still wakes me at times. I'd finished a late shift and was driving home along a stretch of rural road that cuts between farmland and low woodland. It must have been about 1:30 in the morning. The weather was dry, the air perfectly still. One of those nights where sound carries for miles. I came around a gentle bend and saw up ahead what I thought were headlights cresting a hill, but they were far too bright and far too high off the ground. Two pure white lights, close together, moving in absolute silence. I slowed the car, thinking perhaps it was a low-flying aircraft. Yet, there was no engine noise, not even the distant thrum of propellers. The lights drifted slowly across the road about 100 yards in front of me, then stopped, just hung there motionless, like they were waiting for something. That's when my radio crackled and cut out. No static, no signal, just dead air. The dashboard lights dimmed for a second and then came back, brighter than before. The two white orbs merged into one, and a faint halo appeared around them, almost bluish, like a welding arc seen through smoked glass. The whole field lit up. Sheep scattered and I could see them running in every direction. Then everything went silent. No wind, no insects, no sound at all. I don't recall deciding to stop the car, but I did. I opened the door and stepped out onto the tarmac. The light shifted again. It became smaller, denser, and moved closer. I should have been terrified, but I remember feeling oddly calm, as though the fear had been switched off somewhere inside me. For a few seconds, or maybe longer, I couldn't move. The air around me felt heavy, charged. The hairs on my arms were standing upright. Then, quite suddenly, it was gone. The light simply blinked out. One moment there, the next nothing but blackness and the ticking of my cooling engine. When I climbed back in, the digital clock on the dashboard was flashing, as if the power had been cut. It read 3:04 a.m. I can't account for the missing 90 minutes. I remember the time clearly before I stopped. 1:30 on the dot. I drove straight home, locked the doors and sat in the kitchen until dawn. The following morning I found a fine grey residue coating the bonnet and windscreen of my car. It wasn't dust or pollen, it had an almost metallic feel between the fingers. I took a photo of it, but the image somehow corrupted when I tried to transfer it to my computer. I've told no one else about this, not my family, not my friends. I don't want the attention or the ridicule. But after watching your recent videos, I thought perhaps it was time to write it down, even if I still don't understand what happened. You can say this came from someone who prefers to remain anonymous. That's all anyone needs to know. Name withheld. Ghosts, lights, things that go bump in the night, those are easy to fear. They vanish with daylight or with reason. But the next message I received wasn't about anything supernatural at all. It came from someone who discovered that sometimes the scariest presence in your life is one that refuses to leave, even after you tell it to. A story of love turned obsession and how quickly affection can turn into something far darker. This next story comes from Georgia in Perth, Australia. I don't know if this is the kind of story you usually share, but I thought I'd send it anyway. It's not paranormal, but it's something that changed the way I look over my shoulder every single day. A few years ago, I met a guy through mutual friends. We hit it off straight away. Funny, charming, always texting, always wanting to spend time together. At first, it felt good to be wanted, but little things started to feel off. If I didn't reply to a message straight away, he'd send another. Are you ignoring me? If I went out with friends, he'd ask for photos, so I knew you're safe. I told myself he was just protective. After about 6 months, things started to slide. He'd turn up at my work unannounced just to surprise me. Once he waited outside my house in his car until nearly midnight. I told him it needed to stop, that it was too much. He cried, said he couldn't help it, that he just loved me too much. I ended things the next week. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. The calls started, dozens of them, always from private numbers. If I didn't answer, he'd send messages like, "You can't just erase me." Then the gifts came. Flowers on my doorstep, takeaway coffee left on my car bonnet before work, a note tucked under my windscreen wiper that said, "Still thinking of you." I moved house, changed my number, switched jobs. For a few months, things went quiet. I started to breathe again. Then one evening I came home from work and found my back gate open. The latch was bent. Inside, one of my bedroom windows was cracked open. My bedroom had been turned upside down. My drawers were pulled out, my pillows looked like they had been slashed, and photos of me and my friends had been defaced and ripped off the wall. On the bed was a photo of me. My head in the picture had been scratched violently, and below written with the words, "Slag." I went cold all over. The police were sympathetic, but couldn't find anything. No fingerprints, no cameras on that side of the house. They told me to change the locks, install motion lights, and document everything. 2 nights later, my phone rang at 2 a.m. I ignored it. Then a message came through. "Why are you sleeping without me?" That was when I left the lights on, all of them, for nearly a week straight. He disappeared again after that. No messages, no flowers, nothing. I tried to move on, but the silence almost made it worse. I kept expecting him to reappear. About a month later, I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of gravel crunching outside. Someone was walking up the drive. I crept to the window, and there he was, standing in the yellow wash of the porch light, head tilted back, staring up at my bedroom. I grabbed my phone and called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. They found his car parked 2 streets over, engine still warm. Inside were photos of me, taken from outside my new house, at work, even one through the window of my living room. The scariest thing was that they also found a big chef's knife and about a dozen cable ties in his glove box. They charged him with harassment and issued a restraining order. He pleaded guilty and got community service. That was it. It's been nearly 3 years now. I still check the locks before bed. Every unexpected knock at the door makes my stomach twist. So no, it's not a ghost story, but sometimes the real life ones are worse. Thanks for giving people a place to tell theirs. 7 stories, 7 voices, all different yet somehow the same. From lights that move with intent across the Queensland plains, to whispers in South African hallways, to the quiet streets of Bond Beach and the old houses of New Zealand. Each one a reminder that fear wears many faces, some human, some not. Maybe it's the eyes staring in through a window. Maybe it's a message left on your car when no one should know where you live. Or maybe it's the part of you that still wonders what you'd do if it ever happened to you. So tonight, when the lights go out and the house creaks a little louder than usual, just remember, these were their stories, but they could just as easily be yours. And I would love to hear them. So send them through, because you never know, one day I could start a whole series on this. Gauging interest. Happy Halloween, and as always, I've been Shadow Matter, and you've been awesome. Like, subscribe, and flick that bell icon like a teenage girl discovering herself for the first time. And I'll see you here next week for another Halloween special. Stay spooky, Shadow fam.